How you guys all doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Mardiege. Today is Tuesday, October 22nd, down another week in the NFL regular season after the conclusion of Week 7 last night, with the return of the doubleheaders on Monday Night Football. We got two very different looking games, but still we're going to review both of them in today's show. Starting off with the more entertaining one, you could say, the Baltimore Ravens and the Buccaneers combined for 72 points last night. So very entertaining game from that standpoint. We're going to talk about what we learned from that game in today's show, plus the Cardinals and the Chargers. Very opposite end of the spectrum, but still some things we can learn from that as well, plus some more storylines in the NFL, looking at the Texans and Packers game, plus the Chiefs and the 49ers game as well. On top of touching the Deshaun Watson injury as well. We didn't really get a chance to talk about that. So all of that is all going to come up on today's show. Make sure to stick around. But before we get going, I want to remind you guys, if you want to be part of the show and state any opinion, question, or comment you just like to share, please don't hesitate to do so. We always want to hear your input, and your insight is a big part of what makes this show great. So we thrive on your energy and insights, whether or not you guys want to participate, but also when you do, there's an easy way to go about it now, just by using the new Super Chat feature that we have available to you guys. Just by clicking the $sign at the bottom of the chat box, you can send in your Super Chat. This way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Again, use the new Super Chat feature, get involved with the show, and let me know what's on your mind on any of the topics we talk about on today's show and also going forward. But with that now being the case, we can officially look at the totality of Week 7 because it culminated last night, and this game between the Ravens and the Bucs was certainly one that I'm sure a lot more people were, I guess, looking forward to. And, I mean, I was switching between both games, so this one definitely had a lot more, I think, just all over the board, just from the amount of touchdowns and points that there were, plus the storylines going forward. It really had almost everything. And the scoreboard, the difference in the scoreboard only had a 10-point margin, but it felt like it was a bit more dominating by the Ravens, at least from my point of view, because the Ravens won on the road, like I said, 41-31, to win their fifth game in a row, while the Buccaneers fall to 4-3 now, and they continue to alternate between wins and losses over the last couple weeks. You know, it's been week to week now that they've won a game, then they've lost the game, then they won the other one, and things like that. It's really been going on since Week 3, where they lost to the Broncos, then they beat the Eagles, then they lost to the Falcons, then they beat the Saints, and now they lose to the Baltimore Ravens. So it's screaming of inconsistency right now, and you get that a few times when maybe you're not the most well-balanced team, but I feel like this Bucs team really relies on their offense, and I'm a big fan of their offense just because of, you know, the weapons that they have and the great job that Liam Cohen is doing, their new offensive coordinator as well. But that certainly could have taken a hit. It certainly did take a hit last night with the injuries to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, but we're going to talk about that impact a little bit later. But more on the game now. Lamar, a great individual performance last night. Now he's 23-1 against NFC teams, and he's 3-0 against the Buccaneers after a very dominating performance individually, but of course as well for the Ravens as a team. Like I said before, the Buccaneers continue to show their offensive firepower, but like we mentioned in the preview, right, leading up to this game, I went with the Ravens just because even though these two offenses might be two of the most high scoring in the NFL, it's still a case where the defense, when you match up so well with another team, you're gonna find somewhere that it differentiates both of you. And you look at the receivers, you can go one for one. Maybe the Bucs are better. The running backs, you could give it to the Ravens. The quarterbacks, the Ravens as well. And once you go down the line like that and it matches up pretty well, you got to find some sort of different factor that separates you. And I felt like the Ravens had a bit more of those it factor playmakers on defense to really make a difference. And we saw it last night where they were going, the game was still pretty much in hand, but it was those 2 interceptions by Baker that allowed the Ravens to just continue scoring while they stopped the Buccaneers. And when you get a score or 2 back behind the Ravens, they're probably the best team at closing teams out because of Derrick Henry. So the margin of error against the Baltimore Ravens is so thin that even a mistake or 2 turnovers, certainly like this, are end up being the difference in this game. And I think it's going to be the case for a lot of teams going forward. And it shows what kind of level the Ravens are playing at as well. But speaking of those performances that we saw last night, we had to bring up Lamar just because he played as complete a game as you would have liked. He was 17 of 22, 281 yards, 5 touchdowns on the day. He added 52 rushing yards on 9 carries. Also, Derrick Henry doing more Derrick Henry things, 169 rushing yards on only 15 carries. And receiving-wise, Rashad Bateman had the biggest day. He had 4 receptions for 121 yards and a touchdown, while Mark Andrews scored 2 touchdowns to add on to that as well. And on the other side, Baker Mayfield almost threw for 400 yards. He had 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. And running-wise, Rachaad White only had 40 yards, but he did a lot in the passing game, adding 71 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns as well. And Cade Otton, their tight end, finished with 8 receptions for 100 yards as well. And the receivers, Mike Evans only had 1 catch, ended up being a touchdown on that first drive before he got hurt. And Chris Godwin was having a pretty solid game, but of course, unfortunately, he got hurt with like a minute left. So we're going to touch on that in just a few seconds. But we got to get to the game and how it all broke down a little bit here, because I thought it was pretty interesting how just through the course of this game, through this breakdown, that you could see where like the Ravens, you stopped them initially. That's what the Buccaneers did. They managed to slow them out of the gate in this contest. And there was only 1 punt in the first half, and the Buccaneers scored a touchdown on their first drive to Mike Evans, making it 7-0. But then after that, it looked like the Buccaneers scored again, but they ruled it off, so they settled for a field goal, still only 10-0. And then after that, the Baltimore Ravens punted. That was the only punt of the first half. And then from that point on, it really took a turn, because as soon as Baltimore scored a touchdown to make it 10-7, you couldn't hold them off for too long before they got up on the board. Then it became a problem when the Buccaneers threw 2 bad interceptions, while the Ravens, as soon as they got that first touchdown, they got another touchdown and a field goal right after that. After those 2 interceptions, they got a touchdown after one and a field goal after the other. And then in a blink of an eye, now they're leading 17-10, and they're taking that lead into halftime as well. So the Buccaneers, you're not really out of it that much. You're playing at home, you're only down a touchdown, but you really got to start kicking things into gear. And then in the second half, the difference grew even more, because after the Ravens got another field goal to make it 20-10, and the Buccaneers missed a field goal, which is another missed opportunity, you're already, losing the turnover battle. So to lose another opportunity because you missed a field goal, obviously unintentional, but still, you would have kept the margin of the scoreboard pretty much the same. But because you didn't, Baltimore scored 2 more touchdowns right after that, and again, in just a blink of an eye, the score is 34-10, and the Buccaneers are now down 24 points instead of, I don't know, maybe it probably would have been like 14 or a little bit closer than that if they scored a field goal, or if they maybe got a touchdown in one of these other drives. But at 34-10, the game, no one's going to admit it, but it's pretty much over at that point, because it does depend who's playing in this game, right? If you got the Ravens, the Chiefs, or the Lions in another case, if they're up 34-10, if they're up 24 points, you're not going to come back on them regardless of like what team it is, unless it's one of these other great teams. If it's anything less than that, the game is pretty much over from there. But the last 6 possessions were pretty much a free-for-all in this game, because there was 3 touchdowns from the Buccaneers, who still had their starters in pretty much the entire game. And still, one touchdown from the Ravens as well throughout the entire course of those 6 possessions. So the score ended up being 41-31 ultimately. But yeah, the last few possessions, it just felt like it didn't matter. I don't know. That might have just been me, but I never really felt like the Buccaneers were ever going to come back, or that the Ravens, like they've kind of been known to give up some of these big leads. I never felt like that because of the injuries that we mentioned, right, to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And those are the biggest storylines going forward now, because the Ravens, there's not too much to say about them other than maybe cleaning up that defense a little bit more, but still, it's hard to improve on what they're doing offensively. Maybe the penalties, a lot of holding calls last night, but still, when you put up 41 points, it's hard to say you need to definitely get better at this or that. So the Ravens are fine. They're going to continue to beat teams. But the Bucs, it's looking a little bit dicey because Chris Godwin dislocates his ankle on pretty much the last play of the game. And it looks like his season is pretty much over because of that injury, to add on to Mike Evans, who re-aggravated his hamstring injury. And now the reports are saying he's not expected back until after their Week 11 bye week. So the next few weeks are going to be crucial for the Buccaneers. If they can somehow stay above water, it'll be huge. But, they have some tough games coming up. They're going to be at home in that rematch against the Atlanta Falcons. Then they have the Chiefs in Arrowhead before they host the San Francisco 49ers after that. And, we'll see where the record is at that point in time, because if they don't win more than a game, if they go 1-3 over the next couple of games, because they're already 4-3, and if they go 1-2, I should say, we're looking at about 5-5. And when Mike Evans comes back, and who knows what the other records are going to be, the NFC is very, very tight as it is. I don't know where 5-5 is going to get you ultimately for this Buccaneers team. And it's unfortunate because I really like the Bucs just because they do things very well on offense. They have everything clicking, it seems, and they have underrated players as well with Godwin and Evans and all that stuff. But we haven't really seen their defense be able to step up to the challenge. So that's really what worries me. But in the end, the Ravens win. They were the better team. I think we could just all agree on. So they get the win. They go to 5-2, and I believe now next week they have just as tough of a game, if I'm not mistaken. They play the Browns, so maybe never mind. But still, good showing for the Ravens. And speaking of great showings and great results, you got to talk about the other Monday Night Football game between the Chargers and the Cardinals. Not as exciting maybe, but still a very big win for the Cardinals to win it 17-15. We're going to go through all of that and give our thoughts and what did we learn from that game from both teams right after this break.